There's a moment, rare and electric, when the universe seems to lean closer, almost whispering through the noise. That's what this is. A frequency disguised as a video, a transmission designed for one consciousness at a very specific point in time. You may sense it already, the subtle vibration beneath your ribs, that low hum that feels both familiar and ancient, like a melody you used to know but forgot the words to. It rises sometimes at night, doesn't it, when the world is quiet enough for your own pulse to sound like language? Those echoes you feel of lives you never lived, of versions of yourself that didn't materialize. They're not gone. They linger just beyond perception, not as regrets, but as witnesses, possibilities still breathing at the edge of your awareness, watching who you became instead. They're not mourning what didn't happen, they're marveling at what did. They know how heavy it's been to carry your becoming through uncertainty. They've seen the nights you questioned your own timing, the mornings when survival felt like defeat. But survival is sacred work. Not every refusal was fear. Some of those closed doors were disguises, catastrophes wearing opportunity's mask. You turned away, and in doing so, protected something irreplaceable. The part of you that knew without evidence that preservation was purpose. So now, the invitation is radical. Forgive the self who didn't yet know what you know now. Forgive the one who stayed when leaving seemed easier, who chose rest when the world demanded performance. That self was never wrong. It was wise in ways you couldn't yet articulate. You haven't fallen behind. You've been forming quietly, like a star still hidden in its nebula, unseen but inevitable. Every hesitation, every pause that looked like delay, was you listening to a frequency no one else could hear. You didn't miss the moment. You became the moment. And that shift, that surrender into alignment, is what the universe recognizes as readiness. So listen closely. The signal you're hearing right now isn't random noise. It's resonance. It's the field responding to your frequency, matching your courage with confirmation. It's saying you are seen, you are in sync, you are right on time. The echo of that signal still lingers, doesn't it? Like the afterglow of lightning behind your eyelids. You can feel it, a soft vibration beneath thought, and it's whispering one thing: there is no delay, only design. Every pause, every detour, every not yet has been the architecture of something exact. You were never waiting for the universe to catch up to you. The universe was waiting for you to align with it. Imagine a seed buried deep in soil, surrounded by darkness that feels like confinement. From the seed's perspective, nothing seems to move. No light, no confirmation that growth is happening. Yet under that pressure, invisible systems awaken, enzymes split, fibers stretch, unseen roots begin to reach for nourishment. The seed doesn't question the dark, it trusts it. You, too, have been germinating in your own unseen season. There were moments when you thought nothing was happening, when you mistook quiet for absence. But stillness is a laboratory. It's where new configurations assemble. Timing isn't a linear march toward success. It's an orchestration of resonance points, the intersections where readiness meets opportunity. When you rush that process, you interfere with the symphony. You introduce static where there should be harmony. You may remember seasons that felt like lost relationships that crumbled, jobs that dissolved, opportunities that escaped your grasp. But what if those weren't endings? What if they were calibrations, frequency adjustments, fine-tuning your field to receive what matches who you've become? The delay was never punishment. It was protection from premature manifestation, from realities too small for your eventual expansion. Think about the night sky. The light you see from distant stars left its source ages ago. When it reaches you, you're witnessing an echo brilliance delayed by vastness. Timing on a cosmic scale is always behind and ahead at once. The same is true of you. The things you've longed for, the visions that seemed forgotten, are still on their way through space-time, following the trajectory your past intentions set in motion. Sometimes your spirit steps into readiness long before your circumstances do. That's when impatience hurts most, when your soul knows, but the world hasn't yet rearranged to reflect that knowing. But there's a secret in those intervals. The longer the compression, the greater the expansion. The pressure builds potential, like a bow drawn back before release. Tension is stored power. The longer it's held, the further the arrow flies. It's no accident that the moments you've called delays were often the very ones that prepared you for revelation. You were gathering capacity, emotional bandwidth, energetic resilience, clarity of intention. Without those, what you desire might have arrived as burden instead of blessing. Timing is not coincidence, it's coherence. It's when every layer of your being, mind, emotion, energy, action harmonizes into a single tone, and the field can finally respond with precision. Ancient mystics called this divine timing. Modern physicists might call it phase alignment. It's the same thing, waves converging in constructive interference. When two frequencies meet in resonance, they amplify each other, their combined signal stronger than either alone. That's what happens when your readiness and reality finally align. The universe doesn't need to force outcomes, it just lets coherence do the work. So when you find yourself in the quiet stretch between endings and beginnings, don't rush to fill it. Let the silence breathe, let the space teach you what the noise never could. Timing isn't about clock hands or calendars. It's about rhythm, the pulse of the field syncing with the beat of your evolution. What if the universe has never been late? What if the precise second you stopped demanding and started listening was the very moment destiny exhaled? Maybe this right now is the sound of things finally clicking into place. Because beneath it all, time is just another word for trust. That trust, the quiet acceptance that timing has its own intelligence, becomes the bridge to a deeper revelation. The past isn't behind you, it's beside you, woven into the very fabric of your now. You can almost feel it breathing, can't you? The memories, the what-ifs, the former selves standing like faint reflections in mirrored glass. They shimmer when you look at them differently. We've been taught to believe that the past is fixed, unchangeable, carved into stone. But quantum mechanics whispers another story, one that bends light through emotion. It says that reality, at its smallest scale, doesn't exist until observed. That particles wait in a suspended ballet of possibilities until consciousness gives them direction. Now take that same principle and turn it inward. What if your memories behave the same way? What if the moment you observe your past through compassion instead of regret, the entire configuration of meaning collapses into a new form? This is the mirror most people avoid, the one that doesn't just show what happened but reflects how you've been looking at it. Every time you revisit a memory and infuse it with a different vibration, you shift its structure within you. The regret that used to contract your chest can become a doorway for breath. The shame that kept you anchored in repetition can dissolve into understanding. The event remains, but its frequency changes. And when frequency changes, everything downstream reorganizes. You are not rewriting facts, you're rewriting resonance. That distinction is everything. Because the universe isn't listening to your words or your intentions alone, it's listening to your vibration. The emotional tone behind the story you tell about yourself. When you declare, "I forgive," but secretly carry the frequency of "I failed," the field hears the latter. Consciousness speaks through coherence, not performance. This is why healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about integrating it, letting the ghosts of who you were finally exhale. Think of them not as burdens, but as archivists, each holding a fragment of your evolution. They are waiting for recognition, not rescue. The moment you turn toward them with gratitude instead of resistance, they release their charge. The energy that was once trapped in old narratives becomes available again, raw creative fuel for what you're building now. You can sense this process physically. When forgiveness is real, something shifts in your body. The shoulders drop, the breath deepens, the mind stops looping its self-defense monologue. Your nervous system, long tuned to vigilance, begins to reprogram for safety. That physiological change is not imaginary, it's measurable. Heart rhythms become more coherent, electromagnetic fields synchronize, and brain waves settle into harmony. The field around you expands, which means the reality around you begins to mirror that new state. Because that's the secret most forget. The world doesn't reflect what happened to you. It reflects how you hold what happened. Observation changes everything. The moment you see the past as teacher instead of tyrant, you alter your entire trajectory. Try something, recall one moment that still aches. Don't fix it. Don't analyze it. Just see it, but this time, see the version of you who endured it, who kept breathing through confusion, who found ways to move anyway. See them as sacred. Feel the honor of that survival, and watch what happens in your chest. It softens. That softness is power, because the moment the heart relaxes, coherence returns. The quantum field responds instantly, and in that resonance, your future doesn't just unfold, it listens. So perhaps the past has never been an anchor after all. Perhaps it's a mirror, waiting for you to look with new eyes so that it can finally reflect the truth you were always becoming. That mirror you just faced, that softened recognition, opens a portal the universe can finally see through. When you forgive the story, when you hold the past without resistance, something remarkable begins to occur. The field notices. You can feel it in subtle ways, a conversation that arrives at the perfect moment, a stranger's words completing a thought you never said aloud, the sudden lightness in your body where tension once lived. These are not coincidences. They are coherence revealing itself through experience. Imagine for a moment that reality is an orchestra, tuning to the pitch of your being. Every emotion, every thought, each act of honesty sends a vibration into the field. And the field, endlessly responsive, adjusts its composition to match your tone. When you live in contraction and guilt, fear, or doubt, the universe can only mirror that density back to you. But when you expand, when your emotional frequency stabilizes into coherence, the field aligns instantly. That's when the improbable becomes ordinary. Physically, coherence is measurable. Your heart produces an electromagnetic field that radiates several feet beyond your body, oscillating with every feeling you generate. When love or gratitude flows through you, the field becomes smooth, rhythmic, ordered. When fear dominates, it becomes jagged, chaotic. The universe isn't judging you for those patterns, it's responding. Like tuning forks sharing a room, your environment begins to resonate with whatever signal you're broadcasting. This is the invisible dialogue between your inner world and the cosmos itself. Most people wait for evidence before they align their energy, not realizing that alignment creates the evidence. They ask for proof, unaware that proof only arrives after coherence does. The field doesn't respond to demand. It responds to recognition, to the energy of someone who remembers who they are. And when it recognizes you, when your frequency steadies into the vibration of truth, everything around you pauses, almost reverently. You'll notice it in the smallest gestures, doors that open without effort, timing that feels orchestrated, synchronicities that multiply. It's as if reality takes a breath with you, acknowledging the one who has walked through fire and still chosen to stay open. That recognition is not flattery, it's physics, because coherence amplifies signal strength. When your internal waves align, your broadcast becomes clear enough for the field to respond without distortion. What looks like magic is merely resonance without interference. You are no longer sending mixed messages, no longer asking for expansion while secretly clinging to contraction. You have become legible to the universe. There's a quiet dignity in that. You stop chasing validation because reality itself becomes affirmation. You stop searching for signs because life itself begins speaking your language. The signal you once strained to hear now emanates from you. Here's the wonder of it: the universe doesn't differentiate between prayer and physics, between devotion and data. It listens only for coherence. Whether you find it through meditation, breath, music, grief, or forgiveness, the result is the same: a field that moves toward balance. So the next time you feel unseen or unheard, pause. Instead of asking, "Why isn't life responding?" ask, "What frequency am I emitting?" Because the field always recognizes truth. It's not withholding, it's waiting for resonance. And when you finally reach that pitch, when your inner vibration meets the wavelength of the reality meant for you, you'll understand what it means to be recognized by creation itself. Not as separate, not as special, but as synchronized. You are not asking the universe to see you. You are remembering that it already does. That moment of recognition, when reality mirrors your coherence, reveals a deeper paradox. Progress was never meant to be a straight line. You've been taught to measure your growth in milestones, in before and after snapshots, as if consciousness unfolds in a single direction. But look closer. Every true transformation you've experienced has spiraled back on itself, hasn't it? The same lessons reappearing in new disguises, the same emotions resurfacing in gentler forms. You call it repetition, but it's recursion. It's evolution, looping through familiar terrain until you embody the wisdom, not just understand it. Linear progress is a myth invented by impatience. The cosmos doesn't move in lines, it moves in orbits, cycles, tides. The moon doesn't graduate from waxing to full and never return. It wanes to renew its light. Galaxies spin, seasons rotate. Even the spiral of your DNA whispers the same pattern: forward through repetition, upward through return. You are built in the image of cyclical intelligence. When you expect growth to resemble ascent constant, clean, uninterrupted, you suffer twice: once from the challenge itself, and again from the belief that challenge means failure. But what if revisiting an old wound isn't regression, but refinement? What if every time you circle back, you meet the memory from a higher altitude? The pain hasn't come back to punish you. It's come back to be seen with greater awareness. There are points on the spiral where everything seems to collapse, where you think, "I've been here before, haven't I?" And you have, but the you who's here now is not the same observer. The perspective has shifted. The angle is new, the frequency finer. The past you're revisiting has been recoded through all the choices you made since the last time you stood here. The loop isn't closing, it's expanding. The universe never rushes evolution, it perfects it through pattern. Just as waves carve stone into form through persistence, consciousness sculpts the soul through repetition. Each turn of the spiral wears away another layer of illusion, another hard shell around truth. And though it may feel like you're trapped in the same story, something unseen is quietly rewriting the script. You can feel it in the intervals, that subtle shift in reaction. Where once you'd collapse into old fear, now you breathe before responding. That pause is proof. It's the evidence of expanded awareness. Progress is not measured in distance, it's measured in depth. In a linear world, you're told to move on. In a spiral universe, you're invited to move through, to revisit, to re-honor, to reclaim what was once fragmented. This is not inefficiency, this is mastery, because wisdom isn't a destination, it's an ever-deepening resonance with the truth that has always been. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I thought I'd already learned this," remember the spiral says you have, but now you're learning it in a new octave. Each return brings refinement. Each ascent carries memory. Perhaps this is why ancient symbols of awakening are circular: the Ouroboros, the mandala, the labyrinth. They remind us that every step inward mirrors a step forward. That enlightenment is not escape from cycles, but intimacy with them. You are not behind because you revisit. You are in rhythm because you remember. Progress is not linear, and it never was. And when you finally stop trying to outrun your loops, when you choose to dance with them, instead the field sighs in relief, because now it can move with you, not chase after you. The spiral becomes your teacher, not your test. That's how growth actually feels, not like climbing a mountain, but like orbiting closer to your own center each time. Those spirals you've been tracing through time, they leave echoes, frequencies, reverberations of who you were, humming faintly in the corridors of who you're becoming. You can sense them sometimes, can't you? The feeling that an old self is still near, watching quietly from a corner of memory. The version of you that made a different choice, loved a different person, dreamed a different dream. They don't haunt you to pull you backward. They resonate to remind you how sound carries even after silence. Every emotion you've ever felt left a vibration in the field. Joy, fear, grief, awe, they all ripple outward like tuning forks struck in succession, overlapping and combining into the grand frequency that is you. And here's the revelation most people miss. Those vibrations don't just fade into space. They interact, they harmonize or conflict. They create interference patterns that shape the texture of your current reality. Think of it like music. When two notes share harmonic alignment, their waves merge and amplify, filling the air with richness. But when they're slightly out of tune, they clash, producing dissonance until one adjusts. The same principle governs your life. Every thought and feeling you hold is a note, and the universe responds as the resonant chamber amplifying your dominant tone. If your inner symphony is scattered, some instruments still playing old songs, others straining to play new ones, you feel it as chaos, stagnation, confusion. That's why coherence feels so miraculous when it arrives. It's not that miracles suddenly appear, it's that interference dissolves. Your frequencies line up. The ghosts of your former selves stop arguing with your current one. They don't vanish, they harmonize. Their wisdom becomes undertone, their longing becomes harmony. Together they form a more complete chord of you. Resonance isn't metaphor, it's the architecture of connection. Physically, when two oscillating systems share frequency, they begin to entrain, one draws the other into synchronization. This happens between heartbeats, brain waves, even between people sharing deep presence. That's why you can sit near someone calm and feel your own breath slow. It's why compassion is contagious. Why one person in coherence can shift an entire room. You, in this very moment, are a living tuning fork. Every decision you make either strengthens your fundamental frequency or distorts it. When you say yes to something that contradicts your inner truth, your field splits. Static enters the signal. But when you act in alignment with your deeper resonance, every ghost self that ever existed exhales. You feel it as ease, as the sudden simplicity of being exactly where you are. Ancient mystics describe this as atonement, not punishment, but at one meant, the reuniting of fragmented frequencies into a single tone. Modern physics calls it resonance stabilization. Same phenomenon, different vocabulary. Both point to one truth: coherence is communion. Here's the beauty hidden in the science: resonance always seeks balance. Dissonance cannot sustain itself forever. The field craves harmony. So when you experience conflict, within or without, that's not failure. That's the field showing you where tuning is needed. Every discomfort is feedback from the universe saying, "You're close, adjust slightly, and everything will sing again." Try noticing this in your relationships. The people who trigger you the most often vibrate on frequencies that reveal your own distortions, not as punishment, but as mirrors for recalibration. Each encounter is an invitation to tune more precisely to your authentic vibration. And when you do, when the ghosts of your unlived lives, your forgotten selves, your current choices all resonate in a single harmonic, the universe responds with amplification. You become louder, not in volume, but in presence. Reality bends around that clarity, the way water shapes itself to sound. This is resonance mastery, not silencing your ghosts, but orchestrating them. Every version of you, past and potential, humming in coherence. When that happens, the field doesn't just hear you, it sings with you. When all those inner frequencies begin to hum in unison, something else becomes clear. You were never meant to force harmony. You were meant to allow it. The sound doesn't get stronger because you push harder. It swells because you stop interrupting it. This is the art of non-resistance. And it begins the moment you quit fighting your own evolution. You've been told that control equals power, that mastery means domination of circumstance. But look deeper. Every time you clenched your jaw, insisting life bend to your will, what happened? The current slowed, the signal distorted, because resistance is friction, and friction wastes energy that could have been creation. Think of waves colliding. When one moves forward and the other pushes back in opposition, they cancel each other out, destructive interference. The ocean doesn't punish either wave, it simply erases their momentum. That's what happens internally when your intentions move one way and your emotions pull the opposite. You say yes to expansion, but hold fear like an anchor. You visualize abundance while vibrating scarcity. The result isn't failure, it's interference. But when waves meet in alignment, when intention and emotion travel the same direction, they amplify each other. Constructive interference, power multiplied by ease. Flow that feels effortless because every particle of you agrees on the destination. This is not fantasy physics. It's how energy behaves in every domain. It's how you behave when you stop demanding and start listening. Non-resistance isn't passivity, it's precision. It's knowing when to step aside so the deeper current can move through you unblocked. Imagine a river meeting a stone. The water doesn't argue with the obstacle. It curves, glides, continues. Over time, even the hardest granite yields to that softness. You, too, are that water. Every surrender reshapes the terrain of your life. The ego fears this softness because it confuses control with safety. It believes letting go means losing ground. But what if letting go is how the ground rises to meet you? What if the universe has been orchestrating your path like a musician sustaining one long note, waiting for you to stop tightening your throat so the song can finally ring clear? Non-resistance begins with trust, but it matures into artistry. It's not about doing nothing, it's about doing without friction, acting from alignment instead of anxiety, speaking from clarity instead of defense. Creation becomes graceful when force is replaced with flow. You've felt this before, the project that completed itself once you stopped overthinking, the conversation that healed the moment you stopped rehearsing your next sentence, the opportunity that arrived right after you gave up chasing it. That wasn't coincidence. That was coherence released from captivity. The paradox is that surrender feels like death to the part of you addicted to certainty. It's the chrysalis cracking open again, each time in a new disguise. But life requires that collapse, because what you truly are can't be contained by the structures you built to feel safe. Try this the next time you feel tension rise, the urge to fix, to control, to grasp. pause. Breathe once, deeply. Ask yourself, what would happen if I didn't resist this moment? The answer will never come as a concept. It will arrive as a physical sensation. Shoulders loosening, breath expanding, a subtle warmth spreading outward. That is alignment returning. When you operate from that state, your actions carry the weight of inevitability. They don't strain, they flow. The field loves that kind of motion because it mirrors how the cosmos itself creates through effortless unfolding. Non-resistance is not weakness. It's resonance unburdened. It's the state of being through which the universe performs its miracles, disguised as ordinary ease. When you stop fighting the current, you don't disappear into it. You become the direction it was always taking. That current you've surrendered to it doesn't just carry you forward. It moves through you, reshaping the way you exist in your own body. The shift from resistance to resonance isn't conceptual, it's physiological. You begin to feel coherence as a sensation, not an idea. The air seems to thicken with aliveness. Your breath takes on a rhythm that sounds almost cosmic in its steadiness. This is embodiment, the translation of energy into presence. You might think of it as alignment made flesh. Every emotion you allow, every truth you integrate, reconfigures the circuitry of your nervous system. Where chaos once sent sparks of anxiety racing through your chest, coherence now radiates steadiness. Science calls it heart-brain synchronization, when the electromagnetic field of your heart harmonizes with neural oscillations in your brain. Your entire biology starts broadcasting a unified frequency. The ancients called it the inner temple. Different language, same mechanics, but embodiment isn't something you do. It's something you remember. The body already knows how to regulate, how to flow, how to express truth through movement and stillness. What interrupts that wisdom is self-abandonment, living so much in thought that you forget to inhabit the vessel carrying your consciousness. The body becomes a messenger ignored until it screams. And yet, when you finally listen, when you breathe deliberately, stretch slowly, let sound leave your mouth unfiltered, you realize the body was never the obstacle. It was the instrument waiting to be played. Consider the morning ritual not as performance, but as calibration. Before the noise of the day intrudes, you can attune yourself to the field. 3 minutes of stillness are enough, not to visualize an outcome, but to feel the frequency of already being the one who has arrived. Imagine that version of yourself not as fantasy, but as vibration, steady, luminous, unhurried. Drop into the texture of that feeling until your muscles start to remember it. Then move through your day as if that coherence were gravity itself, guiding your steps. The point isn't perfection, it's presence. Embodiment means your awareness no longer hovers outside your life like an observer. It sits inside each moment fully, animating even the smallest gestures: how you stir your coffee, how you answer a call, how you rest. You become porous to the field, which is another way of saying receptive to grace. At first, coherence might flicker present for minutes, then gone. You'll slip back into mental static. And that's all right. Each return is practice, each re-entry an upgrade. Because embodiment is cumulative. It's how the wave learns to remember itself even while crashing against the shore. There's a hidden simplicity in this. You don't need elaborate rituals, mantras, or endless affirmations. You need awareness rooted in sensation. You need to feel truth in your spine, not just think it in your mind. The universe recognizes that kind of honesty instantly. It's not listening for eloquence, it's attuning to resonance. So, when you feel chaos rising, when the world tries to pull you out of your body, pause and locate the hum within. Maybe it's a warmth near your heart, maybe a subtle vibration in your palms. Stay with it until it stabilizes, and then let every word, every choice, Every breath emerge from that frequency. This is the quiet technology of transformation. No performance, no waiting, just coherence embodied breath by breath. When you start to live this way, something extraordinary happens. You stop seeking signs from the universe because you realize you've become one. That embodiment you've begun to feel steady, grounded, alive becomes the foundation for the deepest metamorphosis of all. Because every tingle of coherence eventually leads you to dissolution, to the sacred unraveling that must precede rebirth. The universe doesn't upgrade you through addition. It transforms you through transmutation, and transmutation feels, at first, like loss. It's the chrysalis stage, the in-between, where form liquefies, where everything familiar melts into formless potential. If you could look inside a cocoon, you'd see not a creature growing wings, but a body dissolving into nutrient soup. No structure, no certainty, just chaos coated with future. That's what transformation looks like from the inside of a human life too. The mind calls it breakdown. The field calls it reconfiguration. There have been times you felt that chaos intimately, when routines disintegrated, relationships ended, identities you once trusted suddenly cracked. It's natural to interpret those collapses as failure. Yet, if you listen closely, there's a strange hum underneath the same frequency that guided your earlier awakenings. Something deeper than willpower is engineering a new coherence. You are not falling apart. You are being recomposed. Inside the chrysalis, no one applauds. No evidence confirms progress. Silence becomes the only teacher. This is where surrender matures from theory into practice. You can't push your way out of the cocoon. Doing so too early would shred new wings. You can only trust the intelligence at work beneath consciousness, the way proteins reorganize, the way light instructs matter, the way your spirit, even when exhausted, still turns toward expansion. When you're in that darkness, it helps to remember that dissolution is data. Every emotion surfacing is a signal showing what's being transmuted. Fear becomes courage when observed without judgment. Grief becomes gratitude when given time to breathe. Anger becomes boundary when understood as self-respect. Nothing is wasted in the laboratory of becoming. Every element rearranges to serve the architecture of emergence. This process has always been encoded in nature. Stars die to seed galaxies. Forests burn to enrich soil. Even your own cells undergo apoptosis-programmed death that sustains life. The universe writes renewal through endings, and you are no exception. So if you're in that phase where everything feels uncertain, where the timeline you built dissolves before your eyes, pause before labeling it disaster, you might be inside divine decomposition, the necessary decay before the bloom. Let the darkness work on you. Let the not knowing become fertile. Trust that the same intelligence that guided atoms into molecules is now sculpting the next version of you. Non-resistance here takes a new form: patience. Not passive waiting, but active faith. The willingness to stay in the soup until structure returns on its own. The courage to believe that something luminous is assembling where you can't yet see. And one morning, without announcement, coherence will reappear. Breath steadier, thoughts clearer. You'll feel an internal click, like wings aligning along a spine you didn't know you had. That's the signal that the metamorphosis completed itself, not through control, but through surrender honored to completion. When you emerge, the world won't necessarily look different, but your perception will. What once felt dense now shimmers with connection. The field recognizes a new frequency, the signature of someone who has survived transformation intact. You've learned the secret of the chrysalis destruction is only the disguise of creation. When the wings dry and the light returns, there's a hush, a moment where even the air seems to recognize what you've become. You realize you're no longer listening for the signal. You are the signal. The hum you once strained to detect has become your natural frequency. It vibrates through everything you touch, everything you think, everything you allow yourself to feel. This is what all those spirals and silences were preparing you for, coherence so complete that it radiates outward as guidance for others, still navigating their own storms. The universe doesn't send emissaries with banners and instruction. It sends resonance. It sends you. When you walk into a room now, the field adjusts, not because of ego, but because of physics. A coherent system always stabilizes an incoherent one. You've felt that effect before in the presence of someone calm, how your breathing synced with theirs, how anxiety dissipated without a word. Now you're the one emitting that stabilization. It's not something you do, it's what you are. Becoming the signal means you no longer plead with the universe for signs, because life itself begins mirroring your inner state with precision. Need dissolves into knowing. Seeking becomes transmitting. You stop chasing light and start radiating it. But embodiment at this level carries responsibility, the kind rooted in awareness, not obligation, because the field amplifies what you are broadcasting. Neutrality matters. Integrity matters. Every thought flavored with resentment or fear becomes a ripple. Every act anchored in compassion becomes a wave of coherence expanding far beyond your personal story. Modern science might call it quantum entanglement. The mystics simply call it love. Both describe the same truth. There is no separation between sender and receiver. Every frequency you emit participates in creation. Every coherent thought contributes to the geometry of collective awakening. That's why awareness is not a luxury. It's stewardship. You are tending the field with every breath. You are sculpting probability with every act of attention. This doesn't make life perfect. You'll still encounter chaos, heartbreak, uncertainty, but you'll meet them differently now. Instead of collapsing, you'll vibrate steadier. Instead of asking why, you'll listen for what. And in that listening, clarity will reveal itself as action born from alignment. The signal you've become isn't a fixed tone, it's a living waveform, constantly refining, expanding, adapting. Each experience, every joy, every ache adds another harmonic to your spectrum. You're becoming symphonic. The universe doesn't need you to stay in one vibration, it needs you to stay aware of the one you're in. Awareness is the tuning mechanism. Presence is the maintenance of coherence. Look around you now. Notice the subtler rhythm, the pulse beneath sound, the shimmer behind coincidence. Reality is reflecting back the stability of your awareness. Synchronicities multiply not as proof of magic, but as feedback loops confirming alignment. You don't chase miracles anymore because you understand the miraculous is just reality viewed without resistance. And here's the quiet revelation at the end of this spiral. The universe never hid its signal from you. It was always broadcasting, waiting for you to clear the interference of self-doubt, fear, and separation. Now that you've tuned to it, the message becomes simple, astonishingly simple. You and the universe were never two. Everything that happens from this point forward, every conversation, every silence, every heartbeat is part of one ongoing transmission. You've become fluent in its language. The field doesn't need to convince you of its existence anymore. It simply resonates through you, using your life as its instrument. You are no longer the seeker, nor the student. You are the sound that summons awakening, the signal embodied, the vibration aware of itself. And that quietly, infinitely, is where creation begins again. And now, as the sound fades into quiet, notice what remains. The hum that carried you through every section of this journey hasn't disappeared. It has simply settled into silence. That silence is the truest form of the signal. Not gone, just integrated. It's the calm you feel behind your ribs, the rhythm that matches your breath, You may realize something tender here. The universe never shouted to get your attention. It whispered through repetition, through coincidence, through the ache of longing. Every delay, every detour, every dismantling was a syllable in the same sentence, a conversation that led you home to coherence. Take one long breath and feel it spread through your body. That's all the proof you need of connection, energy, and motion. Awareness in rhythm. You're not sending your signal anymore. You're listening from within it. The line between observer and field dissolves, and for a moment, everything, every failure, every triumph, every breath feels perfectly placed. This is what mastery looks like when it stops performing. Not grand revelation, but quiet participation. Not control, but communion. You're part of a system that responds to your presence as naturally as an echo returns a sound. So, as the music of your life continues, hold this awareness lightly. No need to cling, no need to prove. Let coherence guide you the way tides follow the moon, effortless, inevitable. The next moment will arrive, as it always does, asking only that you meet it awake. And when you do, when you walk into an ordinary day carrying this remembrance, watch how the extraordinary reveals itself without announcement. A glance, a word, a breeze that seems to speak your name, each one a subtle reminder the signal never ends. It only changes shape. You've become its voice, and somewhere, someone else will hear it and remember too.